If you tried and failed, congratulations. There are people that don't even try. Those are the words translated from Portuguese from Bruno Fernandes in a recent social media post. What the hell does that mean? Everybody is asking now, although it does seem to foreshadow some bad news that might be coming soon. We all know that Bruno Fernandes has a big decision to make on where he plays football next week. Not even next season, next week, where he's going to play his football from now on for a football club. Al Hilal have an offer on the table for him, £700,000 a week, tax-free. It's generational wealth, generational money for him and his family, and it's a chance for Bruno Fernandes to, after 5.5 years of trying to drag Manchester United out of the hole that they're in, that they're digging themselves deeper into season after season, Bruno Fernandes has been the one player that has managed to somehow keep United and their heads above water. But this season that's just gone, obviously, although Bruno Fernandes, his numbers were brilliant, the season that he had individually was brilliant, he couldn't help save the team from finishing 15th in the Premier League. They won nothing. And Bruno Fernandes, no matter what he does, is probably looking at this situation now and thinking, I have done all I can. Can I keep doing this? And it's a completely fair question to ask. It's a completely fair question for him to ask himself. And nobody in the world will look at Bruno Fernandes now and think, you haven't given, he has given absolutely everything that he can to this Manchester United team. And still, now, after one of his best seasons in a United shirt, United are 15th and didn't win anything. So it is a big decision for him to make. Does he join Al Hilal? Al Hilal have the offer on the table for Bruno Fernandes. It's on Bruno Fernandes now. Does he want to take the offer? And then Al Hilal will, pending Bruno's acceptance of their deal, go to Manchester United and offer. From what I've seen 80 million numbers. I've seen 100 million numbers. I've also seen suggestions that Al Hilal are prepared to go way beyond that to potentially break the British transfer record in terms of a sale to sign Bruno Fernandes. That is when Manchester United need to come to the table and start negotiating and try and get the best deal that they can out of this. But obviously the big question is, what happens to Manchester United if this happens? Do they end up getting relegated because they are absolutely awful? Bruno is the one that creates the chances. Bruno is the one that creates the goals. Fair concerns, completely fair concerns. How do they replace him? Completely fair concerns given United's transfer record over the last few years in terms of signing players. But on this podcast, I'm going to try and break down everything because I've had this feeling in my gut for a little while that I think this one has some serious legs. Bruno had this decision to make last year. He's admitted that he's had offers on the table previously that he's turned down. I mentioned last summer that Bruno signed his new contract, bought into what the club was doing under a new ownership, under a new scheme. INEOS and the people and the faces that are in charge of this football club at the moment. And he signed in. He bought on. He bought in. He signed on. That was what I meant to say there. But he gave United a year to prove that they were moving in the right direction. They ended up moving backwards. So you can't blame Bruno Fernandes for considering this offer. His agent / brother-in-law has been in Saudi Arabia, been spotted and pictured talking to Al Hilal outside a hotel. And look, the offer's on the table. The offer's there. It's in Bruno Fernandes' court now. And Manchester United, I think, are in such a difficult financial position that I think they're right to just let Bruno Fernandes make this decision himself. It will be spun lots of different ways of United are desperate for the money and they're selling their best player, ripping the soul of the club out, and completely fair arguments. Everyone has massive concerns and those concerns are completely justified. But this is the Promised Land podcast, and the Promised Land podcast is never too high, never too low. That's the mantra that I try and maintain here, and I am a little bit late to this. Although I have done stories and episodes about this Bruno Fernandes story over the last few weeks, it just seems like we're getting to that point now where this is becoming very, very real. And the prospect of losing United's captain, the guy that drags United forward, the prospect of him leaving is more real than it's ever been, especially after this message that he's posted on social media. If you tried and failed, congratulations. There are people that don't even try. How do you internalize that? I don't know. I think we'll know soon enough. In the next few days, I think we will know what Bruno Fernandes is going to do. Chances are he could stay, but I just have that gut feeling that he might end up going in the end. So I wanted to talk about it and what happens after he goes. If he does indeed go. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, get in the comment section, and a subscribe on Apple and Spotify as well. Get in the comment section on there. 5-star reviews, please, and follow me on social media at _Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok as well. Let me know what you think, what will happen, and will United get relegated if they do sell Bruno Fernandes? Let me know. So Ruben Amorim did have his last say on this of the season after United's last postseason tour game that they played in Hong Kong. They won that game 3-1. He said, asked if he thought Bruno Fernandes would go. He said, I don't think so. I don't know for sure. Nobody knows, but I don't think so. I think he's seeing us taking some actions to change things, and that's all he asks. I think he wants to stay. He's saying no to a lot of things, but that shows he wants to win. He's really young, really good. He needs to be in the best league in the world. And they're very valid points, but I think you never, as honest as Ruben Amorim has been, he is not going to take on any kind of responsibility of answering any questions about indicating whether Bruno Fernandes is going to go when he's just literally facing the opportunity of not having to deal with any media that isn't club internal for the next 2 months. United's season is over now. He has a holiday period. He has United's transfer team sorting out all the business, all the deals, players incoming, players leaving. I'm sure he has a gut feeling. I'm sure that he's genuine when he says he wants Bruno Fernandes to stay, but at the same time, he's not going to give any indication that Bruno will leave because that is an absolutely massive story. And he simply, all he wants to do is get Manchester United to a point where they are working better as a team. And undoubtedly, Bruno Fernandes' leadership qualities, his skills, his ability to decide matches, everything that a manager would want. But Ruben Amorim knew exactly what he was getting into. He knew the difficulties with money that United had even before he joined. And I'm sure that he's probably looked at the club now and thought, this is a hell of a lot worse than I thought it was. But I'm sure that Ruben Amorim, just as much as anybody else, knows and understands that £100 million or so for Manchester United in a rebuild phase is absolutely massive. And he has said what he said, but everybody knows the financial trouble that United are in and the depth of the rebuild that is required. You can look at the team and you can look at where Bruno Fernandes fits in it, but no matter what, there are players around him that need to be upgraded. And simply put, United don't really have that much money to do it. They're already committing 62 million quid to Matheus Cunha. That deal is pretty much done. We know that they want Brian Mbeumo next. And look, simply put, the club they're not in a position to go and reject money like this for a guy, no matter his status, no matter his level. United are historically terrible sellers. And I think it's really, in an ideal world, you want to get to a point where some clubs like Chelsea and maybe Manchester City have been over the last few years, where they're able to sell academy products that aren't quite good enough for the first team. They're able to sell players like that on. Sometimes it bites them in the backside, like Cole Palmer, for example, with Man City and Chelsea. But invariably, they make a lot of money and they keep a safe and healthy financial position by selling players who are on the fringes of their first team to other clubs. Sometimes it comes back to bite them, but United simply haven't done that well enough over the last few years, and they've been falling as a football club for a long time. And if you look at this, taking all emotion out of it, selling a player at their peak before an anticipated decline is probably the smartest thing to do. I think Bruno Fernandes' value now is probably at the highest that it will ever be. He could go another season if he hits these numbers next season, but United have just as bad a season as they have had this year, then he's a year older. If United went and won the league next year, for example, and Bruno had that kind of amazing season that he's just had, maybe there's an argument that he would be worth more. But selling him at that point doesn't make any sense. And that's never going to happen anyway. United need to get to a point really where we know they need 6-7 players in the first team to come in this season or to come in this summer ahead of next season to make a difference. That's the simple case, and they need to sell players in order to do that. What this money would do for United is, let's call it 100 million quid. That is absolutely massive. By far, Man United's biggest ever sale. 20 million more than Cristiano Ronaldo, if it is 100 million indeed. But United also, look, the way that these reports have gone, the contract is on the table for Bruno Fernandes at the moment. If he says yes, then it's a negotiation between Al Hilal and Manchester United. So How strong do they want to be in that negotiation? Can they push it further? Can they push it to 120 million or further up? That is an opportunity that I think United would be, like, stripping all the emotion out of this. That is something that you have to entertain, no matter who you are as a football club, no matter where you stand. Look, Liverpool were even considering it for Mo Salah last year. Like, it is money for a player that is going at some point in the near future to become worse. That's just father time catches up with them. But selling at a peak may be necessary for me, and I think it's hard because I know that there's a lot of United fans who are very, very against this because they just simply can't see how United would improve because there's no belief that they will if their best player ends up going. But United as a football club and the new transfer team that are in charge need to somehow fund a rebuild because Ruben Amorim's team are just not athletic enough in order to play the kind of football that Ruben Amorim wants them to play. And if they don't sell at this point, which is completely possible, they are probably going to have a season similar to what we saw last year, really. So how much further are they going to get? Who knows? But there's a lot of people are against this because I think there is no faith in recruitment from supporters, and it's completely valid, completely fair, because there are not really any examples over the last few years of United getting deals in the transfer market right, selling or buying. So there are, what I want to kind of stress, and I have done this in recent episodes as well, is I think the last summer that United had in the transfer market, when Bruno Fernandes signed that new contract to 2027 with an option for a further year, when Erik ten Hag was in charge, but they dilly-dallied on whether to give him a contract extension or not, or whether they interviewed other managers, this kind of thing. That was a summer transfer window of teething problems. We know that that was the case because Erik ten Hag was installed or kept on after winning the FA Cup. After 9 matches, they simply realised, and they probably realised a lot earlier than this, that that was the wrong decision. They ended up sacking him and paying him off, obviously, for that extra year as well. And a couple of months later, Dan Ashworth ended up going as well. So they made their decision at that point. But I think the fact that those moves happened, those terminations happened so soon after that summer, gave the impression to me that there were problems internally and maybe not everybody was on the same page. So I think what is reflected there is they made some signings that were for the manager and some signings that were for the longer term. So Matthias de Ligt, who we might talk about in a second, because I think he said something interesting, probably a signing for Erik ten Hag. But there's other players that United would have brought in that are probably, I'm going to talk about Christopher Vivell in a second as well, probably more for the longer term. So it's important to understand for me, I think, and I want to try and get this across again, that just because United have been awful in the transfer market in the past doesn't necessarily mean that they will be going forward. I think that the thing is now that there is a much more settled unit above the manager. The manager that has been brought in now is a pick of the unit that has been established for a while. Christopher Vivell, who I've just mentioned, has ascended to more of a higher level of responsibility. I believe he's a head of transfers and head of recruitment at the moment. He's just been made permanent. And he has a fantastic reputation of being at other clubs like the Red Bull clubs, of finding players right before they become that massive value. I'm going to take Szoboszlai as an example from Liverpool, Erling Haaland as an example as well. He's obviously, we know where he is and how well he's done. Josko Gvardiol as well. These are all players that have been brought into the Red Bull system previously and have gone and been sold on for massive money. Simply put, United don't have the kind of money to shop in that market. So how do United get to that point on a cheaper basis? Probably by hiring the guy and finding those type of players and adapting them, whether that's on loans or whether that's through like bleeding them through into the first team, and making those players themselves and signing them for cheaper money and bringing them up and raising their value because they've shown that they can improve them as players. Other clubs do it. I see a lot of people shouting for Carlos Baleba at Brighton, right? And he would be a fantastic signing for United. But simply put, I think Brighton signed him last year for around 30 million quid. At the time, I was looking at that and I was thinking, why United over that? There's bigger risks, obviously. But Baleba has shown in just a few weeks and a few months that he is able to deal with the demands of Premier League football. And now Brighton do so well at that because, yes, there's less pressure on them. But simply put, United and their financial situation at the moment is they have to kind of take risks like this. We've seen that Aidan Heaven has come in from Arsenal and has shown that for 1.5 million or for however much he was signed for, he's shown that he's got it. Start identifying these kinds of players and bringing them in, giving them a bit of first team football, loan them out or whatever. Sekou Kone is another one. I'm sure that's a Christopher Vivell find. That is something that United need to do consistently over the next few years in order to backfill, to bring players through the youth academy and bring them into the first team, bleed them into the first team moving forward. So I think there's plenty of examples. There's been some really good examples of this happening over the last year or so that Vivell has been linked with. He has a really good track record, but typically I think the kind of players that he's been signing and the kind of players that he's been bringing into the clubs that he's worked for in the past have been those players who are not quite yet ready to become established first team players. But look at what United are doing so far this year. Look at the players that they're trying to sign. Matheus Cunha, I've already mentioned, basically signed already from Wolves, has had a good few years in the Premier League. Really good year last year in the Premier League, 15 goals for Wolves in a team which were struggling, outperformed his XG. Seems like he's got the character to be able to shoulder that responsibility of playing for Manchester United. It's eaten up better players than him, obviously, in the past, but it's a good example of United signing a ready-made Premier League player. Bryan Mbeumo, I've mentioned as well, is probably going to be next on the agenda. Had a really good, solid few years at Brentford, is ready for that next step up, 50 million quid potentially for United or Newcastle, wherever he ends up going. But I think what you're seeing here is that United are identifying those players that are ready or maybe ready to kind of be on the fringes of the first team and start dipping their toe in and start getting the first team minutes and starting to improve. And hopefully United can develop those players into first team players or sell them on for the kind of profit that I was talking about earlier, the Cole Palmers and the players that Manchester City have sold previously, those kinds of players. That will make a hell of a difference to your bottom line moving forward, but that's in a few years' time. What United need to do now is sign ready-made, established Premier League players, and the types like Cunha and Mbeumo are good examples of that. But they need to find a striker. They need to find, for me, probably one or two midfielders. We'll see what they end up doing. A goalkeeper is super important as well. And I think there's enough there so far to suggest to me that there should be encouragement. United are looking at signing here, and especially in Mbeumo's case, like players that will play for the team that are really effective in a system similar to what Ruben Amorim has been playing at United as well. These are really important things. But tying this back to, you've got to make sales. And obviously there's other players I think that people would prefer to see go before Bruno Fernandes, and plenty might follow. But simply put, this is an offer that is so massive to United that it could really, we talked about if United won the Europa League, really advancing the speed of the rebuild that we all know that they need to do. This is a potential catch-up option. And I will get to a Bruno tactical fit in a minute, but Matthias de Ligt said something really interesting to a bunch of media just before the end of the tour that United have just finished. He said on Amorim, he's really into details. Before signing new players, first he's looking at the culture, what needs to change, and what can be improved to become a better football club. From next season, we will see more of that. I think he wants to build a team of players who are together, fighting for each other and making the most out of what they have. Maybe before you had the best players, but you're not a team. That line there. Maybe before you had the best players, but you're not a team. I'm not saying for 1 second there, because I'm going to come back to Bruno Fernandes. I'm not saying for 1 second that Bruno Fernandes is not a team player, because I think he is. He's a fantastic team player. He's a fantastic captain. And nobody can doubt what he's done for United. He is simply, for me, the best player that Man United have had in terms of what has been contributed, the most effective player, the best player that United have had over the last 12 years. Unquestionable. The only player that they've signed for a lot of money that has gone on to become worth more than what they've bought him for by a substantial margin, by a substantial amount. We're talking about 100 million transfer for Bruno Fernandes here. But simply put, whenever Bruno Fernandes isn't in this team, we look at the United team and think, well, they play terribly. But whenever he isn't in this team, nobody has any confidence at all that United will win a game. And for me, that's massively unhealthy. Massively unhealthy. And maybe sometimes I've talked about many times before how United need to do a rebuild and a complete clear out of players and a reset of the culture, which De Ligt has just said there that Amorim wants to do. A complete reset of the culture and a new start. United have not done this properly in 12 years. They've not done it. They've tried and they've said that they're going to get rid of players and clear outs in the past, and they're going to, bring in a bunch of different players. But there's a cultural rot at Manchester United which I don't think has ever been addressed, and I don't think it ever will be unless the kind of old mentality that's within the football club is cleaned out. And selling a player who is massively PSR positive in Bruno Fernandes, 100 million quid PSR profit, because United have already paid off his transfer fee over the course of his contract, would help United have a little bit of leverage in terms of other players that they wanted to get out. Like, I'm going to come back to this again and say, I'm not for a second saying that Bruno Fernandes is contributing to that negative culture. I think if anything, he lifts them from it. But Bruno is the best player. He's the best player that United have, and this is a unique deal that United won't get for anybody else. So I think it's really worth a conversation about, and I'm pointing out that I don't think that it is all doom and gloom after this. As much as people are thinking that it is because they can't see past a Manchester United without Bruno Fernandes. A Manchester United that doesn't have Bruno Fernandes in the squad at all, that plays for another club. Other players in the team have to come in, step up, and fill the void that Bruno has left. I would much prefer that, let's say United did get Cunha, let's say that United did get Mbeumo, and then maybe they had a bit of money to go and get a world-class striker, one that's ready-made, 26 years old, your Gyökeres, your Ossimans, those types of players. I'm not saying that they will, but maybe. If you spread the goals around that Bruno Fernandes has been scoring into those three, and you build a more effective team, maybe you can buy a wing back, maybe you can buy a more mobile central midfielder than maybe Bruno is or Casemiro is. Does your team work better? Is it super reliant on one player? Or does the team as a whole look greater than the sum of its parts? I think that is the point that United need to get to as a very, very big starting point. They're so far away from that at the moment. I think you can see signs that the tactics are starting to work, but United are toothless in their own box and concede goals too easily in the other way around. They're toothless in the final third and concede too many in their own box, easy chances. But I think what the big priority out of this summer should be is no player is bigger than the club. And Bruno Fernandes' biggest gift here for me could be the fact that he has elevated to such a level of value that United are able to cash in on that and reinvest in order to become a better team without Bruno Fernandes. I think that's something that it's just a massive unknown, and it scares the hell out of people because United have been historically so bad. But I think my impression of what we saw last year, which is sticking with a lot of people, the INEOS transfer window, which was probably quite disastrous for a lot of people, given Ashworth left and Erik ten Hag left, and not all of the signings that were made last summer worked out. I think there was too much mixed messaging that has since, for me, been sorted out. But we'll see. There's a tactical fit question as well. And I've talked here about Cunha and Mbeumo. The fact that United are signing Cunha to start with and are looking at Mbeumo next after missing out on Liam Delap to Chelsea, these two guys are the right 10 in Mbeumo's case if they end up getting him, and the left 10 in Cunha's case. These are the two positions that most people think Bruno Fernandes is best in. So why are United going into the transfer market and looking at signing two players to fill the left 10 and the right 10? What does that tell you? Maybe not that, obviously it's not saying that they want to sell Bruno Fernandes. I don't think that's the case at all. But if anything, if Bruno ends up staying, that probably means he's going to play as a deeper 8. And I know that not everybody is convinced by Bruno Fernandes playing as the deeper 8. So he played in the Europa League final and in that deep position alongside Casemiro. And I think probably that was one of United's weakest points. I've spoken numerous times previously about how Casemiro is due massive credit for the way that he and Ruben Amorim have worked together to find the best form and best version of Casemiro possible in this formation. Ruben Amorim has spoke about it before, that the wing-backs will end up doing a lot of Casemiro's pressing and a lot of Casemiro's running simply because he can't cover the ground that needs to be covered in the ideal Ruben Amorim central midfield pair. He just doesn't have the legs for that. We knew that at the time that he was signed, that he was a plaster signing, and that it would come back to this point, and we would think, oh, United will have a problem getting rid of Casemiro because he's on too much money or in a couple of years' time. That's the point that we're at now, even though he came in and did really well in his first 6 to 7 months or whatever. It is for that midfield area, for me, I think needs a hell of a lot more mobility in it. And it needs players. I don't want this to come across as me saying that Bruno Fernandes is bad for the team at all, but we know, right, on Bruno Fernandes' evidence and the way that he plays the game, he's got better at this over the last season or so, but we know that he is always looking for that killer pass. He's always looking for that adventurous defense splitting pass. And when it comes from deeper, the chances of those passes succeeding, it is much more split. And if the ball is given away in that area, what you end up seeing is the ball turned over really easily. And then Bruno Casemiro midfield pairing, for example, they don't have the legs to really get back and cover behind them. So teams find it a lot easier to exploit United in that sense after turning the ball over. What I think you need for me is, I don't know whether United will end up signing 2-8s, even if they do sell Bruno Fernandes this summer. I think United need midfielders in there, 2, who are really good on the ball, careful on the ball, keep the ball really well, that are mobile, that are tenacious, that are good in 1v1s. And I think that is what Ruben Amorim is going to want out of the players in his final 4 Manchester United team. How do United get there as quickly as possible? I think it's by raising money in sales. And the one that we have on the table at the moment is Bruno. So no doubt that Garnacho and these conversations and Rashford will come up over the course of the summer, but I think those transfers are much more of a slow burn, and it will impact what United can do and how quick they can do it in terms of getting players in for the start of pre-season. But I think United's midfield, as I look at it at the moment, none of the players that they have in those midfield positions convince me. So I think that needs to be addressed. How high up in the pecking order of priority it is remains to be seen. Maybe it changes with better sales and more money coming in, but we'll wait and see. The midfield needs to protect the back 3 better as well for me, and we're not seeing that at the moment. So there's plenty of reasons why Bruno is. Look, if he ends up staying, I don't think anybody's really going to complain about it. Everybody, or most United fans, love Bruno Fernandes and really appreciate what he's done for Manchester United. I think what people are scared of is what happens after he goes, if he goes. And that was the point of what I've been trying to make here, is to talk about how the lack of faith that United fans have in recruitment is based on historical evidence of a team that was completely different to the team that United have now. It's really important to say that. So as much as INEOS and Christopher Vavell and Jason Wilcox and the team that's in charge at the moment have not proven that they're good in recruitment terms, they haven't, to me, proven that they're completely Ed Woodward style level of bad in recruitment terms. So it's a jump into it's a fear of the unknown. But I really think that if United are considering this offer, there's enough in there for me to kind of make me curious and believing enough that I think they can attract the right profiles of players in order to fit the system. And it doesn't even have to be for Ruben Amorim's system. I'm talking about what they're looking at is they need to be looking at players who, if Amorim doesn't work, can play in other systems. But the true most important things for United to get, the qualities that United need to sign in players: mobility, ability to run, tenacity, ability to win duels, these kinds of things, ability to cover ground, strength, technical ability. United and their physical makeup, their physical stature of their team is just nowhere near what other Premier League teams are. And that's why they lose a lot of games in the Premier League for me. Amorim has spoken about it and the differences that United had in Europe versus Premier League last season. It was simply down to physicality, speed, these kinds of things. United was so much worse off in a lot of their Premier League matches and they ended up losing them. And for me, there's not enough flexibility in the team at the moment for United to go and address that problem if they don't make sales that are unpopular first. And I have warned and I have said that I think we could probably expect an unpopular sale or two in the summer. It's just, I think this potential sale of Bruno Fernandes is coming around a lot earlier than I think anybody expected. So, look, we'll see what happens. There's absolutely a big chance that Bruno Fernandes does end up staying. And if he does end up staying, I think that's his decision. United shouldn't force him out, but I think the money that is potentially on the table for United, you have to look at it and think, this is a chance now to finally do the proper rebuild that United have put off doing for a decade. This is the chance. And if Bruno does take the money and does leave, everybody will look at him and say, thank you very much. That is an absolute stint that you've put in there. 5.5 years of giving your absolute all. But one player don't make a team. 11 players do, or 16 players do. United simply need to get to a point where their team is greater than the sum of its parts. And I've said this on the podcast loads of times before. I've said it loads of times, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. But if this does end up happening, I don't think it's as bad. Maybe I'll come back to this in a year's time and I'm completely wrong if it does happen. But I don't think it will be as bad as people are expecting or thinking that it might be. Anyway, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the podcast as well on Spotify and Apple. Get in the comment section. Let me know whether you think United will sell Bruno Fernandes, how much they should be looking for, if it's the right decision, what players they should probably or potentially use to spend the money on. I don't think it will be a direct replacement for Bruno Fernandes. I think it's buying players to fit the team and fit the system and fit the demands of the Premier League. I think that is of utmost importance. So we'll see what happens. But get in touch, get in the comment section. And follow me on social at @_ Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And I'll see you soon, everyone. We wait to see what Bruno Fernandes is going to do. But until next time, I'm Scott Saunders. See you soon.